You're listening to the Public Health Epidemiology Careers Podcast, Episode 41.
Welcome to the Public Health Epidemiology Careers Podcast, where we explore public health epidemiology careers and share tips and strategies to help you enter or transition into the field. And now, your host, Dr. Charlotte Hughes Huntley.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this episode today. This episode is brought to you by the American Public Health Association's Epidemiology section, where I proudly serve as a part of the leadership team there. Now, in this episode, I'm happy to share with you an interview with Eric Pevzner, and we discuss some of the very important and really interesting details about the CDC's Epidemic Intelligence Service, which is the EIS program. Now, there is a great deal of information covered in this episode, but I don't want you to be overwhelmed or worried. I've got even more comprehensive notes in the show notes page for this episode. So a little bit more comprehensive than maybe what I usually include, but that's because there's so much information in this episode. So on the show notes page, you'll find highlights and notes and links to find out even more about some of the things that we discuss in this interview. This is episode 41. So if you visit drchuntley.com/podcast, and once you're there, just navigate to episode 41 and you'll find the show notes page. All right, so let me just take a moment to tell you a little bit about my guest, and then we'll jump right into the interview. Captain Pevzner is Chief of the Epidemiology Workforce Branch in the Division of Scientific Education and Professional Development and Chief of the EIS Program. He is also a Captain in the Commissioned Corps of the United States Public Health Service. He is a devoted advocate for workforce development and has focused on sharing his experience by supervising and mentoring EIS officers, fellows, interns, and graduate students. In addition to those impressive credentials, he is genuinely a really nice guy to talk to. There is also a link to find out more about him in the show notes page for this episode. So without any further delay, let's jump right into that interview. Well, thank you, Eric, for joining me on this episode. I know my listeners are super excited to hear everything that we're going to be discussing today. So welcome.
Thank you.
And if it's okay with you, I'd like to jump right in.
Great.
All right. So I'd like you to start out by just explaining to me and to all of our listeners what EIS, we know it's Epidemic Intelligence Service, but can you just kind of explain what that is?
Sure. The Epidemic Intelligence Service, or some people know us as the CDC's disease detectives, we are a training program, and we provide public health service through the learning opportunities and the training that we provide to EIS officers. EIS has over 65 years of proven success in training EIS officers. We've trained over 3,600 disease detectives since 1951. And about 85% of our graduates go on and continue to enter the public health workforce. As CDC's disease detectives, our officers are often first-line responders, and they are leading public health investigations to control infectious disease outbreaks, respond to natural disasters, other threats to the public health, and also address critical chronic disease issues or things like the emerging opioid crisis in the United States. So the officers get a wide range of opportunities, and what's really special and unique about EIS is really two things. One is the emphasis on training and service. Everything that we do is we're bringing in exceptional people, we're giving them extraordinary opportunities, and there's the expectation that through their learning and the use of the skills that they're developing, that they are providing service, whether that to be to a state or local health department or a ministry of health or an international partner. The other thing that's really extraordinary about EIS, as I've described to you, we've been around since 1951. We have extraordinary alumni, and they're often our supervisors. They're the people that are overseeing and providing guidance to these officers, providing the mentoring, and creating a lot of these opportunities out in the field for these EIS officers to get out and make substantial public health contributions.
That's really interesting. I'm really happy that you added in a full description, because I know that very often people think of epidemiologists as only focused on infectious disease. And in your investigations, you mentioned, chronic diseases, environmental, occupational health threats, and that's really, I'm really happy that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think EIS is famous for many of the landmark investigations related to infectious disease, whether it be investigations about possible biological warfare during the Korean War, smallpox, our contributions to polio eradication, the discovery of Legionnaire's disease, Lassa fever. But then there's the things like our response to Hurricane Katrina. Again, there's the Ebola outbreak and the Zika virus that were highlighted. But again, our officers are making really important contributions to environmental health issues. There's often the emergency response when there's a hurricane or a natural disaster. But then there's the cleanup and the recovery after. And we do a lot of investigation regarding the injuries that are very common and preventable that happen following a natural disaster. Also, there's the environmental issues that result, from the mold growth that happens in structures. And our officers are really critical in going out and identifying the public health impact following emergencies and events like that. So there is truly the broad spectrum of things that our EIS officers are contributing to, as well as doing really important analytic investigations that lead to guidelines for our vaccination campaigns and guidance in the U.S. and around the world. Then there's also the work that they do around injury prevention, around cardiovascular disease, around tobacco prevention and control. So what people are more familiar with is our contributions with regard to infectious disease, but environmental health and chronic disease are also critical emphasis of the EIS program.
That's great. This actually reminds me of the we always talk about this too, but I was really, really impressed by the speech. Dr. Adams, the U.S. Surgeon General, in his in National Public Health Week, in his keynote speech, he talked about the importance of having these non-traditional partnerships within the community, and he even spoke about an incident where he went out in the field and they were working within a community on an outbreak, and it was just this kind of this partnership that helped to impact and really open up the opportunity for them to, impact the community and communicate with the community. And all of the examples that you're giving and everything you're describing, it sounds like, members of EIS are just really involved on so many levels. I guess those type of partnerships are really important in that service too.
Exactly. Surgeon General Adams, when he was the health officer in the state of Indiana, our EIS officers got to work very closely with him during what was a very high-profile HIV and hepatitis outbreak, but it really wasn't about the infectious disease response. I mean, CDC is very good at that. What's far more complicated were the social influences of health, and it was really the use of injection drug use across multiple generations of people that have been marginalized, didn't have access to the health system. The industry in and around the area had deteriorated, jobs weren't available. So it was a really complex coming together of a lot of social and cultural factors that led to behaviors that led to a really unfortunate and preventable outbreak of infectious disease. But it wasn't enough for CDC just to bring their expertise in infectious disease. It was working with Surgeon General Adams and the other officials and the local physicians and experts in addiction and people that have a lot of expertise and work in dealing with communities and coming together with a comprehensive plan that could bring the addiction services, the job training. But then there also needed to be now plans for the ongoing support and treatment for people with HIV and the hepatitis treatment. So it was really a massive public health problem that required collaboration and participation from multiple sectors. And we were really proud that our EIS officers got to contribute to that response and to work with the now Surgeon General Adams.
Yeah, that's so important. I love how, when you describe this, it really starts to build that full picture of, how we're all interconnected in so many ways. Now I want to move into a little bit more about the actual program. Can you describe the program, like the enrollment time and, length of the program, some, activities that are performed?
Yeah. So EIS is a 2-year experiential service fellowship is the way we like to describe it. And what we're emphasizing is training in applied epidemiology and for our officers to be gaining practical skills in applied epidemiology, also some leadership training so that they can be future public health leaders. So each year EIS begins in July with a 1-month summer course where officers who are either in positions where they're assigned to the field of the state or local health department or they're assigned to positions at headquarters, they spend 1 month here together in Atlanta. And in collaboration with Emory University, we have professors from the Rollins School of Public Health that provide some of the epidemiology training. And then we provide training in a broad spectrum of other areas, everything from, again, epidemiology, scientific methods, to communication skills, to emergency response training. And we provide that over the course of the month, gives the class a chance to come together and gel as a community. And that's a really essential part of EIS. But that's a small part of their training, and that's just where it begins. After that 1 month, the officers go ahead and they report to their positions again, either throughout headquarters or the state or local health department. And that's where 90% of the training happens, is where they're working with their primary and secondary supervisors in their positions, many of whom are former EIS officers, who are guiding them on following certain learning requirements that we have as part of the program. They also will then go and have a fall course during their first and second year of the program. The first year fall course is really dedicated to learning how to, for them to come in and share their evaluation of a surveillance system. Surveillance is obviously a foundation of public health, and we want to make sure that they have an appreciation for how complicated it is to collect and utilize surveillance data. So they're going out and they're doing an evaluation of a surveillance system. They're presenting that during their first fall course. They're also getting training in scientific communication, both how to be optimized, getting their messages across, both in writing and in oral presentations. Their second year fall course has other things that are included, such as leadership training and management of complex public health issues. So also as part of that, the other thing they get is we have a Tuesday morning seminar, which is every Tuesday throughout the year where one of the EIS officers presents their scientific work. At times we also have a discussant, and that's an opportunity for other epidemiologists in the CDC community to go ahead and ask challenging questions of our EIS officers to really get them to think critically about the science they're doing. And following this Tuesday morning seminar, we also have additional post-TMS topics where we give them other critical training elements they need to be successful during their EIS career. So our application period opens in the spring of each year, normally in April, and it closes on June 22nd of this year. So people go ahead, and that's the deadline for responding and applying to EIS. The application requires they submit a personal statement, which is critical. We really want to see that people have been thoughtful and can really give a compelling argument about how they can benefit from the training provided by EIS and also what they think they can offer to the EIS program. They have to provide transcripts and 4 letters of recommendation, and that's what we go ahead and use as an initial step to select the people that we're going to go ahead and invite in for interviews each year. We have anywhere from 120 to 160 EIS officers each year across our 2 classes. This incoming class this year is going to be 66 in the 2018 class, and it's really an impressive combination of individuals that are coming into the class from a varied range of disciplines.
Wow. Now, this brings a question to mind. As you're describing, that initial 1 month, in Atlanta, and then they are dispersed to whether they're going to be in headquarters or state and local government or local health departments. How is that determined?
So each year during the EIS conference, the candidates or the people that have been selected as EIS officers, they come to our annual EIS conference. And during that conference, it's a normal scientific conference where the EIS officers are presenting their scientific work. They have to submit oral abstracts to be reviewed and accepted for the conference. It's highly competitive. So that's going on. At the same time, we have around 100 positions, either at CDC or state and local health departments, that would like to have an EIS officer. They're attending the conference, and they're presenting the opportunities that they're making available to EIS officers. And that's going on between Monday and Thursday, and the incoming EIS officers go around and they meet with the different representatives from the positions. At the end of the conference on Thursday, they have to go ahead and sign up to interview for with at least 6 positions. Then on the next day, that Friday, there's an interview process where EIS officers sign up to interview with, again, at least 6 positions. The EIS officers rank their positions from 1 to however many they interviewed for, and each position rates the officers. And then we have an algorithm that we use to go ahead and match the officers with positions based on the rankings and ratings. An officer then can either be matched to a state or local position if that's what they interviewed with, or one at headquarters, and some officers interview for both.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty elaborate process, but that's really good to know. So it's not just sort of a pick and match or a look at the draw. There's really a lot that goes into matching up the right officer and the location.
Exactly. We want to find the best experience for each officer, and they all bring really impressive and a diverse set of skills and experiences. And, for some, it's really important to be at CDC headquarters where they can get really in-depth mentoring from subject matter experts, and that's what they want to do. They want to develop that subject matter expertise in a particular area. They want to be an expert on HIV. But then we have other people that really want to get out to a state and local health department where the real public health action is happening. Mm-hmm. And every day, some people describe state and local health departments as the emergency rooms of public health. Every day, there's new challenges coming into the health department. So an EIS officer placed there could be working on any number of different topics, and they could be working on outbreak investigations, following up with contacts, looking at concerns about an environmental exposure, looking at rolling out vaccine guidance. How do they educate a community about new medicines are available or guidance that are available for physicians, and how do we get that adopted? So it's really a wide range of things that you may be faced with the state or local health department. So it's 2 very different types of experiences, and it's really important for us that the officers spend the time talking with the physicians to ensure that the ones that they're interviewing for really meet what they want to get out of their EIS experience.
Oh, I see. That's really, really good. And then I was going to also ask you about, like, the deadline is June 22nd for this year, and that's for the class that comes in 2019.
Yes.
Okay, so about how long after the close of the application period before someone, before they're notified of next steps?
So as soon as the application site closes, we immediately go ahead and start reviewing all the documentation that's been sent. And every year we have around 500 applications. Again, so for this last year we had about 500 applications for 66 spots. So it's highly competitive. Mm-hmm. And we have staff with the EIS program that go ahead and evaluate all of the paper applications, and we score them. We also then go ahead and we also have representatives from around the agency, from the various programs, also go ahead and review the applications. We combine the scores, and we look at the scores for the overall class, and then we normally invite around 130 or so people in for interviews. And that normally happens anywhere from around sometime in September and October, and that's when we're doing our interviews. After we do our in-person interviews, we take that data along with the scores that we have from the desk's review, and we go ahead and we make our invitations to people to be selected in the class, and that normally happens in November. We've moved up our entire time frame for applications to selection so that physicians or other people that have to make decisions about fellowships or other things that are being notified around that time, that they don't have to choose other fellowships before they hear about EIS. Now physicians know whether or not they've been accepted into EIS before they're hearing about medical fellowships.
Okay, that's great. All right. Well, what are some examples of, how people have benefited from participating in the EIS program? Just some sort of, case studies that you can kind of share with me. It could be your own or just something that, give us an example of how it's been really helpful for someone in the program.
Sure. I've obviously got endless exciting examples I can share with you. I'd like to start with mine. So I was an EIS officer with the Division of Tuberculosis Elimination in the Global Tuberculosis Branch. I was assigned to work on an outbreak of tuberculosis amongst people that were reported to be using methamphetamines. out in the state of Washington. This was back in 2006. And the state and local health department there invited us to come and work with them because they were concerned, was there something about methamphetamine use that might have been contributing to TB transmission? So I had the opportunity to go out there with a very experienced epidemiologist and with a medical student, and we got to work with these incredible public health nurses that had a great understanding of the community and been working with these patients that were really struggling with a horrible infectious disease. And I had a chance to work with the people that were originally diagnosed to understand how they might have become infected, to go ahead, and I had to go ahead and meet with people they'd been spending time with. These would be referred to as their contacts, people they were sharing space with that might have also been infected, so we could look at the magnitude of this outbreak. And so I was going into jails, and I was going into areas where people were experiencing homelessness, were congregating. And I was also having to go to a reservation there for Indigenous Americans. And so it was really complicated, a really broad spectrum of people I was working with. And what was fascinating for me was that ultimately by working with these really experienced public health nurses, we were able to make connections based on laboratory data and epidemiological data and realizing this was not a new outbreak. This was something that had been going on for 20 years where previously someone had been diagnosed with TB, around that time or before that, their family had been hit by a drunk driver and killed. And this gentleman just fell into deep depression, got involved with alcohol and other drugs, and was really suffering from addiction. And he became infected and developed tuberculosis. And his disease then spread through other people within his network that were also abusing alcohol and using drugs. And it was really hard for him to be able to complete the TB treatment that was taking 6 months. And so he would start treatment, stop treatment, start treatment, stop treatment. And the nurses didn't give up, and they just kept working with him. And eventually, they did their best to identify everyone in that social network that might have been exposed. And for people that were at greatest risk, and some of whom we know were infected, we offered preventive treatment. Unfortunately, one of the women in that network that was offered preventive treatment, she also was suffering from addiction, was not able to complete the preventive treatment, went on to develop disease 10 years, more than 10 years later, and she was a continuation of this outbreak to the group that I was working with now. And what was of great benefit to me was this opportunity to learn just how important it is to sit and listen to the population that is affected and to work with people on the ground, these exceptional nurses that had this institutional knowledge, this great experience in working with this community. And together, we were able to bring in addiction services and other groups to more broadly address this problem, get people stable housing, get some people into treatment for their addiction, get more people screened and started on preventive treatment. And because of the dedication of the nurses and the other members of the health department, we were able to get a lot of people to complete preventive treatment and the people with disease to get their disease treated and cured and ultimately bring an end to this outbreak. And it was just an invaluable and foundational public health experience for me as an EIS officer. So that's my personal example that had a profound impact on me and shapes how I view working with state and local health departments and collaborating with them. Another great example is one of our current EIS officers, Caitlin Casaboom. So she's a veterinarian by training. She had been involved with CDC previously because she did our Epidemic program, our international version, where she was able to go overseas and get some public health experience as a vet student. Became familiar with EIS, applied, and she's really passionate about One Health. One Health, where we're really focused on the health of people, animals, and the environment. And so we were notified of a situation in Namibia where we had a massive die-off of hippos believed to have been dying from anthrax. This was particularly concerning because in other countries in Africa previously, when there's this die-off of animals like this, there's been a number of times where anthrax has then gone ahead and been passed over into human populations, resulting in deaths. So Caitlin was the right person in the right time, And she worked closely with another fellow here at CDC with our laboratory leadership service. And together, they made plans to do training for when Caitlin got to Namibia to use a new rapid diagnostic, to use that to detect anthrax in the field. And Caitlin deployed to Namibia, and she partnered with multiple ministries with the government in Namibia, went out and did rapid diagnostic testing of the carcasses of hippos and other dead animals, and was able to confirm many of them had died of anthrax. And then working with the locals, she had gone ahead and developed a plan for assessing people's knowledge of the risk of anthrax from consuming these dead animals, and then put in a plan for providing prophylaxis for many of the people that might have been exposed to these animals. And I'm pleased to report, thankfully, there were no cases of human anthrax reported. We believe that was in part, at least in part due to the actions of Caitlin and her colleagues within the Namibian Ministry of Health and all of her colleagues. And so what Caitlin takes away, the benefit that she gets is, number one, is she's really passionate about One Health. And she got a chance to really practice that in working in Namibia. Secondly, she got to experience the importance of the collaboration between lab experts and epidemiologists, and that interface is so important in public health. And the third thing that's most important for me that I think she benefited from, and she would agree, is beyond going out and having this training opportunity and making a contribution as far as ensuring there were no human deaths, and also providing prophylaxis for animals, so stopping the spread in the animals as well. But she made an incredible contribution by building capacity with her colleagues in Namibia who now know how to use this rapid diagnostic to do the testing with the animals, confirm there's an anthrax case, implement an education campaign for the local communities, and provide prophylaxis as necessary. And thankfully, because of that capacity is built, hopefully the next time there's a die-off like that, we don't need Caitlin to go out. But the Ministry of Health is perfectly capable of using this new technology and these skills that they built by collaborating with CDC, and Caitlin was a big part of that. And I think that's an extraordinary benefit for herself. It's something that EIS is proud of and the CDC is proud of as well, and I know the Namibian Ministry of Health is also.
That is very impressive. I mean, I almost want to jump in myself.
Yeah, the opportunities that the EISers often have are extraordinary, and many have opportunities to make contributions from their desks on a daily basis. I don't want to oversell the program. A lot of the work that we do is also by asking really important public health questions, sitting down on the computer and spending hours upon hours analyzing and reanalyzing data and trying to answer these important questions to provide data for state and local health departments so they can figure out how to use the finite resources that they have for the best public health response in collaboration with them. And nothing's more evident than the contributions that we make in that sector than the fact over the last year we had 4 of our EIS alumni that were named state epidemiologists. And one of the graduates from our 2016 class has also just been selected to be the state public health veterinarian for Pennsylvania. So states recognize the valuable experience that our officers get, and they're getting selected to be leaders of states' public health programs, and that's really impressive and important.
That is very. I have a question for you. In your example of your experience with the TB scenario, how long? You may not know exactly, but about how long were you there? Did it take to kind of get to that conclusion?
So after we were notified, it took several weeks for us going back and forth in communication with the state and local health department to understand how we could come in and best collaborate with them. What did they really need from us? And we prepared, and then I was on the ground for about 3 weeks. But that was just the beginning. Fortunately, I had my supervisor, Dr. John Altman, was an experienced EIS alum himself. He was my supervisor, and he really emphasized to me that, Eric, this is the beginning, not the end of the investigation support. And so together with our field services program in the Division of Tuberculosis Elimination, I was in regular communication with the state and locals there for up to a year, where sometimes they would ask me to run additional analyses for them for a different look at the data to help them guide what they were doing, and for me to just stay involved and see how I could continue to provide some service to the great work that they were really doing after I left. Because what I was doing was really just providing some information to help guide the hard work they were doing, but the hardest part came after I left. And for me, it was incredibly rewarding that they made themselves available, and I was able to continue interacting with them over the course of a year to really understand the impact of the work that they continued to do.
That's great. Wow, that's just really impressive. I don't know about many of the people that are listening right now, but I really did not realize myself how in-depth and how multi-layered the experience really is. I mean, definitely, that's just the best phrase I could think of, is multi-layered experience, but that's phenomenal. Now, what about qualifications for the program? And I realize that, I will link to application details and all of that for anyone who's interested. But in terms of like the degree required or any kind of certifications, or if there are any, restrictions on location, I know our podcast audience is really a global audience. So listeners may wonder about, whether or not they're required to be a U.S. citizen and just those kind of details. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, we take our selection of EIS officers very seriously. It is a highly competitive program, and we have limited slots. And we want to make sure that we are selecting the people that can best benefit and utilize the training that we provide. And so our program is open to both U.S. citizens, and we have a select number of slots each year open for non-U.S. citizens and non-U.S. permanent residents. And as you mentioned, the detailed eligibility criteria are available on our website. We have a newly designed website with a great link right on the front page about applying to EIS that gives you all the eligibility criteria. We're normally looking for people with doctorate degrees, and specifically we're looking for physicians, veterinarians. We'd like nurses, and for nurses, it's just required that you have a bachelor's in nursing degree. It's preferred if you also have a master's in public health, but the clinical skills are really critical. And so physicians, veterinarians, nurses, and then we also scientists from a broad range of categories, whether you have a doctorate in epidemiology or other area of public health, but other people with a doctorate that really have a passion and interest in applied epidemiology and service. Those are the people that we're hoping apply to EIS and then come in and benefit from our training.
Okay. All right. That's great. And that's helpful to know. And I can definitely appreciate that, because you're not saying that there is a strict yes or no in terms of citizenship, but it's a very, which I can understand, competitive process. So, I appreciate that it's, taken on pretty much a case by case scenario and situation.
We welcome international applications. Because we are a domestic funded agency, and the majority of our mandate is domestic, our emphasis is on selecting U.S. Citizens and permanent residents, but we also recognize and value the contributions that international officers make, and we always hope, they add a lot to the class. A huge unspoken benefit of EIS is your classmates. The cohort is a part of it when you come in. I mean, these are people that I reach out to on a daily basis. When I worked in global tuberculosis for 12 years, I'd often reach out to them as they were working in many countries around the world, and I could always count on my classmates or other EIS alumni they could reach out to help answer a question, help me with something I didn't understand, make contact with someone in a country where I didn't have someone to work with. So it's an invaluable resource, and the relationships that you make are really important. And having internationals in the class adds quite a bit. The perspective that they offer and the diversity that they bring with their experience to the class and their perspectives is invaluable.
Right. That's great too. Thank you so much for all this information and, for taking the time to go into all this. I just have one more question for you. And it really is just, I'm trying to think in terms of, anyone that might be listening, trying to anticipate the questions, but do you have any advice or tips for people who are really interested in participating?
First thing is I always recommend going to our website, which is cdc.gov/EIS. There's lots of great information about, again, eligibility, about the training that we provide, about the experiences of EIS officers, about our alumni. You can really get a nice, rich understanding of what the EIS program has to offer. The second thing I would say is that each year, as I mentioned, we have an annual EIS conference. It's normally in April. It's free to attend, and I really recommend that people that are interested in EIS try and attend our conference. When you come to the conference, you get to see the scientific presentations of EIS officers, so you can really understand the type of work that they're getting to do, the service they're providing, and some of the impact that they're having. And to take advantage to talk with them and understand the experience they're having and see if that's what's important to you, if that would benefit your career, and if that's something that would be really rewarding for you. We also have hundreds upon hundreds of alumni that are at each conference. And so it's a great opportunity to meet with them and understand how EIS allowed them to do certain things in their career, so you can speak with them. So attending the EIS conference is really a great place for people to come, better understand the program, and make sure that this is the next best step for them. The other thing is I think it's just important to understand what we really value and prioritize with EIS is, again, that people that understand we're a program with training in applied epidemiology and service. And we take that expectation very seriously. We really expect that EIS officers are trying to answer important questions, respond to emerging threats or ongoing issues, and really provide critical data and response capacity to state and local health departments and international partners, and understand that this is about collaboration. And it's about working with your colleagues at CDC and the other groups that I mentioned to really solve complex public health problems. And we're really looking for people that have a passion to do that.
That's amazing. Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know my audience says I will speak on their behalf. But it's very important work. It's an important program, and I'm really happy that you were able to take some time and explain, in some detail and give us some great stories and examples. I definitely will be providing all the comprehensive information and links to more information on the show notes for this episode, and so everybody will have a chance to access it and find out more information if they have questions as well. So thank you so much, Eric, for being here today and for sharing this.
Sure, thank you. And I just wanted to mention, EIS is a great program. We have a lot of other really exciting programs here at CDC for people interested in advanced training in public health. I'd love to make people aware of our laboratory leadership service. This is a program for people that have a doctorate in laboratory sciences and at least 2 years of postdoctoral training. And that's where they come to CDC, or they could be assigned to a state or local public health laboratory. And they're getting training with an emphasis on quality and safety and leadership. And this is really so we make sure that we have top laboratory scientists with training in these critical areas to really guide and lead public health laboratories. Another great program is our preventive medicine residency and fellowship. That's a great opportunity for physicians to come and take their clinical skills and transition and apply that in a public health framework with really exceptional placement and training opportunities through CDC. We also have our epidemiology elective program, and that's great for medical and veterinary students who love their clinical work and they're looking for something more, they're interested in a population perspective. It's a great opportunity for them to come and do a rotation at CDC and better understand public health and where CDC fits in, and learn and see how they could potentially have a career that combines their clinical training and public health. We also have our Science Ambassador Fellowship. This is a program that's really near and dear to my heart because it reaches out to educators of middle school and high school students around the country. And they come to Atlanta in the summer, and they work to develop lesson plans and curriculum to get middle school and high school kids excited about epidemiology and public health. And it's just great when we bring these people that are so passionate about teaching kids, and then we're able to give them some resources and skills to bring epidemiology and public health. And we actually have, we're now actually getting to the point where we have some people applying to EIS that have gone through the Science Ambassadors program, and that's incredibly rewarding. We also have just two other programs I want to mention, which is our Prevention Effectiveness Fellowship and our Public Health Informatics Fellowship program. Our Informatics Fellowship program, EIS is known as the disease detectives. Our Informatics Fellowship, they're known as our data detectives. And they work really closely with EIS officers and our Laboratory Leadership Service fellows. And they go out, and a lot of times, increasingly, the data that we're dealing with for public health response and addressing issues are so complicated and come from a variety of sources. And it really requires someone with an informatics background to help epidemiologists and laboratory scientists be able to collect and think about how to use the data in a meaningful manner so we can have rapid public health response. So EIS is a great program, but I also think it's really critical that people know about these other programs at CDC, and that just like our EIS program, applications are open until the 22nd. I want people to know that LLS applications are open until July 11th, and I hope some of our listeners would consider applying to that great program as well.
Okay, so July 11th for the LLS? Is it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's great. I actually there's two things I want to mention. I think one of the things you've mentioned a few times that resonates with a message that I won't say preach, but I do mention it often. And that is how important it is to find your passion for public health, because that is what will drive you through your career. And you speak about that. You spoke about it several times as you described EIS and then in the additional services. And I appreciate that you've put that in there and that my listeners can hear that from somebody else's voice other than mine, because that's so important. The other thing I want to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I would love for you to come back and discuss some of these other programs as their deadline approaches and go in maybe a little bit more detail about some of those as well. Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, either myself or one of our leaders of these programs. I'd love to get some of these program leads to come and talk to you about the programs, because the same passion and closeness that I have with EIS, they have with these other programs, and they could give you far more detail about the really exciting work that members of their programs have done. And other thing, I know I mentioned a lot of fellowships. For any of the listeners, CDC has a website, cdc.gov/fellowships, that has information about all the fellowships offered at CDC.
I will make sure to link to that as well. And that sounds great. We'll work on coordinating schedules and making that happen. I think this is just valuable information. It's part of the reason I built this platform, is to really disseminate this information, and so more and more people can find out about these opportunities. So that's great. I thank you for adding that in as well. Well, I think we've had a full conversation. Thank you again, Eric, so much. I very, very much appreciate all of the information that you shared. And to all the listeners, I will be putting all of the links that Eric mentioned in the show notes as well, so that you can check into each of the programs that he mentioned. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Eric as much as I did. As promised, all of the links to the organizations and the information about the EIS and even more about Eric is provided for you in the show notes for this episode. We covered a lot of information in this interview, so please visit the show notes page. It's drchuntley.com/podcast. And once you're there, just navigate to episode 41 and you'll find all the information there to explore a little further. And I'd like to just point out one or two things really quickly. I hope you could hear, like I did, the passion in his voice. When Eric talked about the EIS and gave examples of case studies of others who have gone through the program and how they've benefited, and he talked about his own, experience and his journey with EIS and some of the things that he's done, you could tell that he's really passionate about the work that he's doing, and that's what I've been talking about. And that when I speak about finding your passion for public health, we all have it. the populations that we care most about, the work that we're doing, because we know that it's making a difference. So when you can connect with the work that you're doing, it's not quite work. It's really more of a mission. And when you can get there, then you really are going to be an effective leader. Your role in public health is going to really make a difference and affect that positive change that we're always seeking. So I just wanted to point that out. One more thing. If the CDC is your goal job, if working with the CDC is something that you really want to have happen and you strive for that, and maybe perhaps you don't qualify for EIS right now, there are opportunities and there are ways to, explore. And I always encourage you to pursue if that's, your dreams, if that's where you really want to work. But I also want to encourage you to think about what Eric discussed in this interview. There are multiple opportunities to partner with CDC, and CDC really value those partnerships within the local government, the state government, the community. And perhaps there are ways that you can work within the community setting or regional government and other nonprofit organizations and partner with CDC to further the mission. So that's a way to be able to work with CDC if that's your goal. And perhaps it would be an opportunity to get you closer to that organization ultimately, if that is still what you want to do. Just something to think about. All right, guys, until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Public Health Epidemiology Careers Podcast at drchuntley.com.